The first cry came soft, then sharp, cutting to the quiet luxury of the mansion like a crack in glass. It wasn't the usual cry the staff had learned to ignore or gently soothe. This one made everyone in the room freeze. The millionaire stood still, his expensive phone forgotten in his hand, as his baby's tiny face twisted in fear the moment the new maid stepped forward. The room, filled with sunlight and polished marble, suddenly felt cold. The maid hadn't done anything wrong. She was young, neatly dressed, her hands folded nervously in front of her apron. It was her first day, and she had been warned about the strict rules of the house, the silence expected, the importance of staying invisible. She had barely crossed a nursery door when the baby saw her and started crying in a way no one had heard before. Not hunger, not discomfort, something deeper, something unsettled. The millionaire, known for his calm control in business and life, frowned. He had everything money could buy, cars, power, respect, but his child was the one thing that made him uneasy. The baby had always been quiet, observant, almost too calm. Doctors said he was healthy. Nannies said he was unusually sensitive. But this reaction? This was different. The crying grew louder, more desperate, as if the baby was trying to say something he didn't have words for. The head nanny rushed forward, lifting the baby, whispering soft reassurances. It's all right, she said, rocking gently. But the baby's eyes never left the maid. Tiny fingers clenched. His body stiffened. The maid took a small step back, her face pale. She looked confused, even hurt. She hadn't expected this. She needed this job. She needed the money. But right now, she felt like she didn't belong there at all. Stop, the millionaire said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority. Everyone paused. He stepped closer, studying his child's face, then slowly turned to the maid. His eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with recognition. A strange silence filled the nursery, broken only by the baby's uneven sobs. Where are you from? He asked. The maid hesitated before answering. Her voice was soft, almost trembling, as she told the name of a small town no one in the room had heard of. The moment she spoke, the baby cried harder. The millionaire's expression changed. Color drained from his face. It was as if a door in his memory had been forced open without warning. He looked at the maid again, really looked at her this time. At her eyes, at a faint mark near her wrist, she tried to hide. His breath caught, and when he finally spoke, his words stunned everyone standing there. No, this isn't possible, he said. The room held its breath. The baby's cries echoed off the walls, and the maid stood frozen, unaware that her presence had just awakened a secret buried for years, a secret that was about to change every life inside that mansion forever. The maid felt every pair of eyes in the nursery turned toward her. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure someone could hear it. She lowered her gaze, unsure what she had done wrong, unsure why a baby who didn't know her could react with such fear. She had worked in other homes before, cleaned other rooms, cared for other children. Never once had something like this happen. Her hands shook as she tightened her grip on the edge of her apron. The millionaire took a slow step back, as if steadying himself. His mind raced to places he had buried long ago, memories wrapped in silence and money and decisions made under pressure. He had promised himself those years were over. That part of his life no longer existed. Yet here he was, standing in a sunlit nursery, feeling the past rise up without permission. He glanced at the baby again, whose cries now came in gasping bursts, small chest rising and falling too fast. Take him, he said to the head nanny, his voice low. Give him some air. The nanny nodded and carried the baby toward the window, pulling back the curtain slightly. The crying softened but did not stop. The baby's eyes stayed fixed on the maid's reflection in the glass, as if even distance couldn't ease whatever fear or recognition lived inside him. The maid finally spoke, barely above a whisper. Sir, I can leave if you want. The words tasted bitter, but she had learned long ago that arguing with powerful people only made things worse. She had come here for a fresh start, to escape a past that followed her like a shadow. She didn't know that shadow had already found her again. No, the millionaire said quickly, surprising himself. Stay. He paused and added, please. That single word shifted the room. The staff exchanged uneasy glances. This was not how he usually spoke. He was a man known for control, for clear orders, for never showing doubt. Yet now his eyes held questions he wasn't ready to ask out loud. As the other staff quietly left the nursery, the room grew smaller, heavier. The millionaire studied the maid's face again. There was something familiar in the curve of her eyes, in the way she stood when nervous. He remembered another woman, years ago, standing in a very different room, making a very different choice. A choice that had changed everything. "Your mother," he said slowly, testing the words. "Is she still alive?" The maid stiffened. She hadn't expected that. "No, sir," she replied after a moment. "She passed away when I was young." The baby whimpered softly, as if reacting to the words. The millionaire felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. He turned away, walking toward the window, staring out at the perfectly trimmed garden below. Everything in his world was designed, controlled, shaped to his will. Yet this moment was unraveling that illusion piece by piece. He wondered if the baby sensed what adults refused to see. Children, people said, felt things more honestly. They reacted without filters, without lies. The thought unsettled him. Behind him, the maid stood silently, unaware of the questions now circling his mind. Questions about her past, about her mother, about a promise he had once broken. Questions about whether fate had just stepped into his home, disguised as a maid in a simple uniform. And as the baby's soft cries filled the space between them, one truth pressed harder than all the others. Whatever secret had been awakened, it was far from finished revealing itself. The millionaire left the nursery without another word, but the silence he left behind was louder than any command. In the hallway, he slowed his steps, pressing a hand briefly against the wall as if the house itself needed to hold him upright. Faces from the past flickered in his mind, names he hadn't spoken in years. He had built his success on forgetting, on moving forward without looking back. Now his own child had forced him to look straight at what he had tried to erase. Inside the nursery, the maid stood alone with the head nanny and the baby. The crying had eased into a soft, uneasy whimper, but the baby still refused to settle. Each time the maid shifted her weight or lifted her eyes, his tiny fingers tightened again. The head nanny noticed it too. She had raised children in this house for decades, watched them grow, watched secrets come and go. This felt different. This felt personal. "You didn't do anything wrong," the nanny said gently, though doubt crept into her own voice. "Babies sense things. Sometimes they remember what we don't." The maid nodded, though the words gave her little comfort. All her life, strange moments had followed her. People reacting to her in ways they couldn't explain, doors closing without reason, opportunities slipping away at the last moment. She had learned to stay quiet, to blend in, to survive. But here, in this grand house, blending in suddenly felt impossible. Later that evening, the millionaire sat alone in his study, surrounded by shelves of awards and framed headlines praising his vision and leadership. None of it mattered now. On his desk lay an old photograph he hadn't touched in years. A young woman smiled back at him, her eyes full of hope and trust. He remembered the promises he had made, the fear that had driven him to walk away, the money he had used to make problems disappear. He had believed that was the end of it. But the baby's reaction replayed in his mind again and again. The way his child had cried, not in pain but in warning, as if trying to protect something or someone. Downstairs, the maid unpacked her small bag in the servants' quarters. Inside were few clothes, a worn notebook, and a folded letter she had never opened. Her mother had given it to her before she died, telling her to read it only when the time felt right. For years, the time never had. Tonight, her fingers brushed against the envelope, and a chill ran through her. She didn't open it. Not yet, but she felt the pull stronger than ever. Meanwhile, the staff whispered in corners, sharing uneasy glances and half-formed theories. A baby didn't cry like that for no reason. A powerful man didn't lose his composure for nothing. Something was shifting inside the mansion, something unseen but deeply felt. As night settled over the estate, the baby finally slept, though his brow remained faintly furrowed. The millionaire stood outside the nursery door, listening to the quiet, knowing sleep would not come easily for him. Somewhere between guilt and fear, a truth waited to surface. And with every passing hour, it became clearer that the bond between the baby and the new maid was no coincidence. It was the beginning of a reckoning no amount of wealth could stop. Morning light spilled to the tall windows of the mansion, but it brought no relief. The millionaire moved through the halls with a restless energy, his thoughts tangled in questions he had avoided for years. Every corner of the house seemed to whisper reminders of the past, memories he had locked away. Yet here, in his own home, he could no longer ignore them. Each step toward the nursery felt heavier, as if the house itself resisted him uncovering what had been buried. Inside the nursery, the baby stirred again, eyes wide and searching. The maid stood nearby, hesitant, sensing the tension in the room like a living presence. She had tried to feed him, soothe him, play with him, but nothing worked. The baby's attention remained fixed, unwavering, on her. It was not fear this time. There was recognition, a silent connection that no one could explain. The maid's heart pounded. She wanted to speak, to ask what he remembered, but she dared not. Words could break whatever fragile thread of calm existed here. The millionaire entered the room quietly, watching from the doorway. His eyes scanned the baby's face, then the maid's. He noticed subtle details, her gestures, the faint mark on her wrist, the way she held herself with a mix of caution and strength. His mind raced. How was this possible? How could a child, barely a year old, react so strongly to a stranger? And why did that stranger feel familiar in a way that unsettled him to his core? The head nanny cleared her throat, sensing the weight in the air. "Sir," she said cautiously, "maybe the baby just—" Her voice trailed off. There were no words to explain what everyone was feeling. It was bigger than behavior, bigger than coincidence. Suddenly, the baby began to cry again, louder, more urgent, almost as if he were warning them. The millionaire moved closer, lifting the baby into his arms. The instant contact, the baby's tiny hands clinging to him, sent a jolt through his chest. He had never felt such a surge of emotion. Something was trying to speak through the child, a message from the past that demanded attention. The maid stepped forward, trembling slightly. "Sir, she began, but he held up a hand, stopping her. He couldn't allow himself to speak yet. He needed to see, to feel, to understand what was happening. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with anticipation, as if the mansion itself held its breath. Hours passed, but no one left the nursery. The baby's cries became intermittent, sharper, almost urgent. The millionaire finally spoke, his voice low and strained. "Tell me everything about your mother," he demanded. The maid froze, startled by the intensity in his eyes. It was no longer a polite question, no longer a casual inquiry. It was a demand for truth, for history that had been hidden too long. The baby whimpered again, pressing closer to the millionaire. In that moment, the invisible thread connecting past and present, parent and child, stranger and familiar face, seemed to pull tighter, unbreakable. The mansion, normally so controlled, felt alive, tense, waiting. Every heartbeat, every glance, every whispered thought pointed toward a revelation that had changed everything. Outside the nursery, the staff murmured in nervous anticipation. In the kitchen, a cook paused mid-step, feeling the weight of something monumental unfolding just beyond the door. The tension was electric, a storm about to break. No one dared speak. No one dared move. Everyone sensed that whatever came next would not only expose secrets long buried, but reshape every life in the house forever. The millionaire looked at the maid again, his expression unreadable. The baby's cries had ceased, replaced by wide, searching eyes, and for a fleeting moment, the room was silent, heavy with expectation. Something was about to happen. Something they could feel but not yet see, and it would change the course of their lives forever. The silence didn't last. A sudden knock at the nursery door startled everyone. The millionaire instinctively held the baby closer, his gaze sharp and alert. The maid stepped back, her heart racing. Who could it be at this hour? The staff exchanged worried glances, unsure if they should answer. But the knocking continued, slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. The millionaire finally spoke, his voice calm but edged with authority. "Who's there?" No answer came, only another 3 slow knocks. His hand moved instinctively to the sideboard, where a small drawer held a set of old letters and photographs he had nearly forgotten. The baby squirmed slightly, as if sensing the tension rising, eyes darting to the door. When the door creaked open, a figure stepped inside, a man in his 40s, dressed plainly, but there was a familiarity in his stance that made the millionaire freeze. Recognition and shock collided in his chest. The man didn't speak at first, his eyes scanning the room, settling finally on the maid. A tense silence followed. "You!" the millionaire said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The man's lips curled into a faint, unreadable smile. "It's been a long time," he said. The maid's eyes widened. She didn't recognize the man at first, but something in the way he looked at her, the intensity of his gaze, made her stomach tighten. Her past, memories she had pushed aside, events she had tried to forget, suddenly felt closer than ever. The millionaire turned fully toward the man, clutching the baby tighter. How are you here?" he asked, his tone sharp, demanding answers. The man's presence didn't just feel unexpected. It felt dangerous, like a key turning in a lock that hadn't been opened for years. The baby stirred in his arms, whimpering softly, his small fingers grasping at the millionaire's shirt. The connection between the child and the maid pulsed with urgency, a silent signal that something more was unfolding, something that went beyond family secrets. "I came to warn you," the man said finally, his voice low, almost a growl. "Some things from the past, they don't stay buried." His eyes flicked to the maid, then back to the millionaire. "And some promises were never kept." The words hit like ice. The millionaire's mind raced, the mansion suddenly feeling smaller, suffocating. Every carefully constructed part of his life, the wealth, the control, the success, seemed fragile now, threatened by truths he had long ignored. And the baby's reaction earlier, the maid's presence, the man in front of him, it all began to align, forming a pattern too precise to be coincidence. The maid's hands trembled, her past and present colliding in one sharp moment of fear and anticipation. She had always known that her life held secrets, but she hadn't expected them to follow her into this house, into this nursery, in front of this child who somehow knew more than he should. The millionaire's jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" he asked, but the man didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope yellowed with age. He held it up without speaking, letting the tension in the room rise further. The baby let out a sudden cry, louder, more insistent than before. He twisted in the millionaire's arms, reaching toward the envelope, as if understanding its importance even before the adults did. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of anticipation. The stage was set. Old secrets, unexpected connections, and the fragile safety of the baby and the maid, all hung by a thread. The envelope, the man, the reactions of the child. They were signs that nothing in this mansion would remain the same. Something monumental was about to be revealed, and everyone inside felt the gravity of the moment, though no one yet knew how far-reaching it would be. The millionaire took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years pressing down on him. Slowly, he opened the envelope the man had handed him. Inside were photographs and letters, brittle with age, detailing a connection he had long tried to forget. A connection between the maid, the man before him, and a chapter of his life he had buried in shame. The maid's mother had once worked for him, years ago, trusted with his family's secrets, only to vanish under mysterious circumstances. And now, standing in front of him, was the daughter she had left behind. The baby in his arms stirred again, but this time not with fear. His small fingers reached toward the maid, wrapping around hers as if he recognized her as family. The millionaire's chest tightened with emotion he had not allowed himself to feel in years, guilt, relief, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. He looked from the child to the maid, and then to the man, and everything clicked. The baby's fear, the reactions, the unspoken warnings, it all made sense. I should have known," he said, his voice trembling. "I should have protected her, all of them." The man's expression softened slightly, a shadow of the past guilt passing between them. "You didn't. the man said quietly. But it's not too late to make things right. For the first time in the house, there was a fragile, tentative calm. The baby giggled softly, clutching both the millionaire's hand and the maid's, bridging the gap between past mistakes and present hope. The maid's eyes filled with tears, a mix of relief and recognition. She knelt beside the baby, finally able to let go of the fear that had followed her for years. But just as the tension seemed to dissolve, the man spoke again, his tone sharp. "There's one more thing you need to know." The millionaire froze. The baby's tiny eyes widened, as if sensing another storm approaching. From inside the envelope, the man pulled a smaller, folded note. "Your child," he said slowly, "was never meant to be hidden. Someone else is watching. Someone who knows what happened years ago, and they won't stop until they get what they want." The room went silent, the previous relief evaporating in an instant. The millionaire's grip on the baby tightened. The maid stepped closer, protective, her past and present now fully entwined with the man's warning. Even the staff outside the room felt the shift, sensing the danger that lingered beyond the walls of the mansion. The baby reached toward the note, his small hands clutching at it like a magnet. It was as if he understood that this new revelation was part of a bigger story, a story that could change their lives forever. The millionaire looked at the maid, determination hardening his features. "We'll face it," he said, voice steady. "Together." The man nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes, but there was no denying the threat that hung over them. Outside, the mansion felt unusually still, as if holding its breath for what was coming next. The baby yawned, innocent and unaware, but the adults knew the calm would not last. And then, as the maid tucked the baby closer, the envelope slipped from the millionaire's hands. A single photograph fell out, one he hadn't noticed before. It showed a shadowy figure, a stranger, standing at the edge of the old estate where the maid's mother had disappeared. The figure's face was obscured, but the posture, the hands, the aura, it was unmistakable. Someone was coming, someone who had been waiting for this moment all along. The baby cooed softly. The maid held him tightly, and the millionaire stared at the photograph, heart-hammering. The story was far from over. The mansion had revealed its secrets. Yes, but the danger had only just begun. The photograph slipped to the floor, but the millionaire didn't move to pick it up immediately. Instead, he looked at the maid, the baby in her arms, and the man who had brought the envelope. For the first time in years, the mansion felt like more than just walls and wealth. It felt like a home, fragile and real. The tension that haunted every corner seemed to ease slightly, replaced by a cautious hope. He finally bent down and retrieved the photograph, studying the shadowy figure at the edge of the old estate. Though the face was obscured, he recognized the posture and certain details that confirmed what the man had warned. Someone had been watching, waiting for a long time. Yet the fear that had gripped him earlier was tempered by the realization that they were no longer alone. They had each other. And for the first time, the millionaire felt a sense of control rooted not in power or money, but in connection and understanding. The maid knelt beside him, the baby cooing softly in her arms. "We'll keep him safe," she said quietly, determination in her voice. The millionaire nodded, grateful for her courage, and the man stepped forward, placing a hand on both their shoulders. "The past is dangerous," he said, "but it's also a guide. We know who to watch for, and we know how to protect what matters." The baby reached out, touching the photograph with tiny fingers, then looked up at the millionaire with a soft, trusting gaze. In that moment, the man realized that the child's instincts, the fear, the warnings, the recognition, had always been guiding them toward the truth. The baby wasn't just innocent. He was perceptive, sensitive, and connected to a story that no adult could fully comprehend alone. As the day progressed, the mansion slowly returned to a semblance of normal life. Staff went about their duties, careful not to disturb the fragile peace, while the millionaire and the maid settled into a routine, learning to navigate each other's presence. The past had been revealed, but the future was still theirs to shape. Conversations flowed more openly. Secrets once buried were now acknowledged, and the baby's laughter, soft, innocent, and full of life, filled the house in a way it never had before. That evening, the millionaire stood on the balcony, looking out at the gardens below. He thought of the choices he had made, the mistakes he had tried to forget, and the lessons he had learned in the span of a single day. The weight of wealth and control seemed lighter now, replaced by something far more valuable: understanding, family, and the knowledge that some connections could never truly be broken. The maid joined him quietly, holding the baby close. "He's happy now," she said softly. "And so are we." The millionaire smiled, feeling a rare sense of peace. He had faced the past, confronted the secrets that had haunted him, and discovered that even long-buried truths could bring clarity, connection, and hope. And though the shadowy figure in the photograph remained a lingering reminder that vigilance was still necessary, the mansion felt alive again, not with fear or tension, but with possibility. As the sun set over the estate, the baby yawned and nestled into the maid's arms, eyes closing in trust and comfort. The millionaire watched them, a deep gratitude settling in his chest. The story of fear, mystery, and revelation had ended, not with destruction, but with the quiet strength of human connection. And in that moment, he understood what truly mattered: love, trust, and the courage to face the past while embracing the future. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and control, now stood as a place of healing, hope, and new beginnings. And for the first time, everyone inside knew that the most powerful legacy wasn't money or power. It was family, in all its unexpected, imperfect, and beautiful forms.